Welcome to the Nikki Clarke Show. I am your host, Dr. Nikki Clarke, and I am so excited to be back again with another stellar interview. The show is where we bring you inspiring conversations with individuals who are making a meaningful difference in the world. And today we are honored to welcome Nadia Korolyshyn, Outreach and Communications Director and board member of the organization Arise Again 2. Nadia's story is one of resilience, faith, heritage, and service. Born in New York City to Ukrainian immigrant parents who fled their homeland during World War II, Nadia grew up connected to her Ukrainian roots and culture. And over the years, she has served on mission teams to Ukraine, helped distribute Ukrainian Bibles, supported newcomer families, and now plays a key role in providing humanitarian aid and raising awareness about the ongoing challenges facing the Ukrainian people. With a background in healthcare, photography, insurance, and senior living, Nadia has dedicated her life to helping others and advocating for truth and compassion. Please join me in welcoming Nadia Korolyshyn to the Nikki Clarke Show. Welcome, Nadia.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate your allowing me to share what's so heavy on my heart and having an opportunity to enlighten people and perhaps answer some questions people have about the Ukrainian issue.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to it. And thank you again for joining us. Can you share a little about your family's journey from Ukraine to North America and how those stories shaped your identity?
The story is very interesting. It's not just my parents, there were so many people who were on that journey. My parents fled shortly after being married. And what a way to spend a honeymoon, fleeing the country and the family and everything that you owned and possessed and that was near and dear to you. They
Mm-hmm.
left and they went through Austria, Czechoslovakia at the time, but Austria, and they worked on a farm for a short period of time where my mother and father met up with another couple about the same age. They both newlyweds. I mean, everything was pretty much the same, and both women were pregnant. So it was
Mm-hmm.
really a challenge. And so they gave birth on the way there and were working on a farm, a really lovely Austrian family, farmers allowed them to stay and to work, and they would be able to take care of their newly born children and have a job and provide for them while they were continuing on their journey. What was interesting is two Russian soldiers came into the house when my mother and this other woman were staying, while my father and the other man were um, wanting to find out what was going on, where the Russian front was, and to find out, where they were and whether it was safe to continue on, because their
Mm-hmm.
plan was not to stay on that farm. Their plan was to keep on moving. But
Yeah.
anyway, two soldiers came in and they almost nearly, well, they were planning on raping the two women, my mother and this other woman. But my
Mm-hmm.
mother fell to her knees and started praying. And one of the soldiers, who she thought was Ukrainian, but didn't know for sure, but kind of thought he might have been, said, "Look, leave them alone. They just had babies. Why do we want to mess with women who just have babies?" And so they finally just left. But my mother just attributed that to her praying and that God was protecting her and this other woman. And so after that, everything calmed down. And of course, they continued on their journey and they ended up in a DP camp, which is a displaced persons camp. And they were there for 2 years. And
Mm-hmm.
my mother and the other lady, actually, they moved to Canada, the other couple. But but my mother and father had sponsors in New York City. That's how they ended up in New York. My uncle, which I guess he was my uncle, yeah, uncle or a great uncle actually. But he had a restaurant in the Lower East Side of Manhattan where there were many, many Ukrainians. And so he sponsored them, and then they shortly after they started working, actually rather quickly, they began working, and that's how they ended up in New York. Shortly after that, I was born, and
Amazing.
the journey goes on.
And the journey goes on. Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
So that's an incredible story. What you shared about your parents, experience being displaced during World War II. Now, how did their resilience influence your own outlook on life?
When you see people have gone through so much and starting to build a life, the whole thing of hard work and just faith and hard work and just putting your hand to the plow and doing what you have to do to take care of your family. And just the love they had for Ukraine. My mother actually, she had a very difficult time. My father adapted much easier, but my mother had a more difficult time. In fact,
Mhm.
one day she and her aunt were walking down the street in Manhattan, and my aunt just collapsed and just, passed away. And it just really scared my mother. She thought that, oh, I want to go back to Ukraine. There's fresh air. People are dying here from, the pollution was much heavier at that time. It wasn't like it
Mhm.
is now where it's much clearer. But it really scared her. She thought that people were just falling and dropping in the streets, but it really impacted her. Although, she got over that, but still, she always had that longing in her heart to go back to Ukraine, but couldn't.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Growing up in both American and Ukrainian cultures, what traditions or values have remained most important to you?
Oh my goodness, Ukraine has so many beautiful traditions. I always loved Christmas because we actually celebrated St. Nicholas Day. And
Okay.
so on December, I think December the 5th, you go to where everybody gathers into this hall, and it was
Mhm.
usually like a church hall or something, and they would have somebody dressed up like Saint Nicholas and would distribute gifts to the children. Of course, a lot of times the parents purchase those gifts, and then Saint Nicholas would call them
Yes.
out. And if you were naughty and you weren't a very good, they would have like a little stick, and they would, like to spank you or something for being naughty. You either got a gift or you got a spanking, but they didn't really do that. But that was kind of a tradition. It was kind of a fun thing, but or you got coal. I think everybody's heard the coal story. Yeah, but anyway, so that was really beautiful. And the different foods that they made and the tradition for Christmas Eve dinner was really beautiful. They would have something that they would make, it was called kutia, which was made out of wheat berries, honey, poppy seed, maybe some nuts and raisins, and it was very delicious. And they always had that, and everything was symbolic. Everything you ate was
Mhm.
symbolic. And then they would have borscht, but they would have like a meatless borscht, which would have little
Mhm.
like little varaniki. They called them ushka, but they would have these little varaniki. They had mushrooms in them rather than meat or anything like that. And then they would have, a meatless dinner, but it was always so good, and everything always smelled so good, from the cooking and the baking, and it was just a really lovely time. And one of the traditions was to under the tablecloth they would put hay and coins. We didn't put the hay, but my parents would put the coin. We didn't have hay, but when Ukraine they would do that, and so that was always fun to go and try to find the coins, for us kids, to find the coins under the
Yeah.
tablecloth. And then Easter, of course, everyone's heard of Pisanki, which are the traditional hand painted batik style. Easter eggs. Well, they weren't Easter eggs, but they're Pesach kid. It's no egg. You don't eat it. They blow out the insides and then they paint over the eggs, and
Mhm.
that's a very, very beautiful and extensive process. My sister-in-law and my niece are very good at it. In fact, my sister-in-law painted the painting behind me. But anyway, so yeah. So anyway, so that is another really nice tradition for Easter. And then on Saturday, the day before Easter, people would bring it's an Easter bread. It's called the Pascha. And it's just this really sweet, delicious bread. I mean, you could eat the whole thing if you wanted to. It's so good. But anyway, they would bring that and then kielbasa and
Mhm.
what else? Ham and different foods and eggs, not the pesanke eggs, but hard-boiled eggs. And they would make a really pretty basket and go to church, and the priest would bless the basket, and it
Mhm.
was just that was really always a beautiful tradition. And again, everything smelled so good in the house because the baking that bread and the baking ham and the kielbasa, everything was just so fragrant. It was just one of those things that always stays with you. There were probably other things,
Absolutely.
but anyway, I guess
Yeah.
the point is that the traditions, such as those two, are always very meaningful. The
Mhm.
music, the art, um, is also just very beautiful. The dancing, the Ukrainian dancing, everybody knows Ukrainian dancing, the hopak and other dances that are very famous, very much so in Canada. Uh,
Yes.
they have some
Yes,
really
we've
amazing Canadian dance.
vibrant Ukrainian community in Canada.
Yes.
Absolutely. And fun fact for my birthday in December.
Uh-huh.
So two things tied into what you just shared. I'm actually named after St. Nicholas
Oh, you
because
are?
I yeah,
How
I was
nice.
supposed to be born December 25th. So Nikki is my nickname, but my name is Nicola, and I'm named after St. Nicholas. One
Oh,
fun fact.
nice.
And then on my birthday, that passed in December, I was actually celebrating with my children at a Ukrainian restaurant, which I love. I love
Oh,
Ukrainian. Yeah.
yeah.
So just saying, yeah, full circle. I definitely love that. So let's talk about your faith. At what point, did your faith become a central part of your life and inspire your involvement in missions work?
Oh, wow, that's a loaded question. For a period of time, I kind of walked away from the Catholic Church, which I was brought up in the Byzantine Rite, the Catholic Byzantine Rite, very beautiful, beautiful churches, and the whole ritual is just very beautiful. Occasionally now I'll go because it brings back really nice feelings. But anyway, I stepped away from that, kind of like went on my own, just lived a life for myself, so to speak, as so many of us do. Once we're out of high school, we kind of like try to find our way, and we do all sorts of different things that may not be um, exactly based on faith. But as time went on, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. I became saved, as they call it. But became a believer and developed my relationship with Jesus, which was later on, it just tied into my desire to help out in Ukraine. But my first trip to Ukraine, I think really, which was still under the Soviet Union, which really was an eye opener for me. At that time, I
Mhm.
was not a believer, but very close to becoming, or maybe had just become a Christian. But it was amazing to me when I went there what life was like, because I knew what it was like because I heard from my parents. They would get letters from Ukraine all the time, and they were always sending packages to Ukraine because there was nothing there, uh, for the people to
Yeah.
have. They had to do a lot of bartering if they wanted to get services. They wanted to see a doctor. If you had a gift to give them, you were more likely to see a doctor. But after my first trip and not being allowed to go to the village where my parents were born. That was just such an eye opener. And the other thing that was a real eye opener is the lack of food. The shelves were very empty.
Mhm.
You were getting these little coupons if you wanted to purchase like a chicken or something. What you would get is just bones. You would get this really starved looking chicken. And I
Mhm.
think that that really started to really stir something in me again, the things that my parents told me and hearing that and going to Ukrainian school and learning the language. Well, I learned the language. That was my first language. I spoke Ukrainian before English, but
Mhm.
actually seeing the things that I was hearing about in the letters that my grandparents and relatives were sending and seeing it was just like an epiphany, like, wow, this is really not a very good life these people are living. And faith was something that was really squashed in Ukraine and all the Soviet countries. It had to be, everything had to be approved by the Soviet regime, according to what the Russians wanted, because of the mass
Mhm.
Russification going on in all of the countries, not just Ukraine. There were 15
Mhm.
republics in the Soviet Union. The Russians controlled that. And so having seen that, it impacted me to the point where it was always like, what can I do? What can I do? How can this
Mhm.
change? You tell people about it and they don't want to believe that that could be possible because it's supposed to be great in the Soviet Union. Everything's supposed to be marvelous and wonderful. Life is good. But it wasn't that way. So later on as my Christian walk developed, I was attending a church where we did the whole outreach with the Bibles.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
prior to that, I had met via phone. I met this gentleman who was securing lots and lots of Bibles and sending them to the church where I later, excuse me, became, my throat is getting dry, where I later met this pastor in Ukraine, in Kiev, Ukraine, which was New Life Church. And so because I got connected with this particular gentleman, he was actually from California. He had quite a story. I'm not going to go into that. But he and I connected, and he was able to get Bibles for me. And I was able to get the pastor, well, I didn't, we discussed it. And he felt that would be a good project and a good outreach to get Bibles sent to Ukraine. And so we just developed a team and we were sending Bibles out to Ukraine. I don't remember all the specifics. It's really too bad, but I do know that I
Mhm.
have some pictures of us packing Bibles and sending them. And unfortunately, I didn't save some of the letters I received that people were so happy to get Bibles in Ukrainian. It was so meaningful to them that, that it really made me feel like, wow, doing this, there's more that I can do. I just have to find out how God's going to lead me. And later, I developed a relationship with this pastor at New Life Church. Then we lost contact. And then when the war broke out in February 2022, we reconnected. And through that, I met a gentleman by the name of Walter, and he
Mhm.
was the president and is the president of Arise Again 2.org. And because we both had that same passion, and the people on the board all had that passion to get the truth out and to get people to help and to participate in the outreaches that we were trying to develop. So anyway, so
Excellent.
okay, what was your
Yeah. I, I I think you touched on something that I wanted to expand on about Arise Again to Two. Following the Russian invasion in 2022, uh, you are the outreach and communications director, and I would love for you to touch on why it's important to combat misinformation and propaganda surrounding the war.
That is extremely important, and it's a really important question. A lot of people, they believe what they hear on the news or what they see on the news. And I'm not putting down the news. It's the information that they're getting. The Russians are very good at passing out propaganda. So there has been so much, especially after that incident at the White House with President Zelensky, shortly after the war. A lot of people just felt like for some reason, it just put the kibosh on helping Ukrainians because the misinformation after that was very intense. That President Zelensky was rude and obnoxious and not very respectful, which is not exactly, if you watch the video of what that whole transaction, of that whole situation, it was totally different than what they were saying and what they were putting out there. So a lot of people who felt they wanted to support Ukraine decided they wouldn't because then they started hearing things about how the corruption, how corrupt everybody is there, and how everybody's pocketing all the money, and how, all these bad things are happening in Ukraine. But the truth is, there's corruption everywhere. I don't know of any country that there isn't some form of corruption. I know there are some, but that was that should not have been the focus. The focus should have been, especially the churches, should have been really focusing on the needs of the people and what was happening to churches. Churches were being intentionally bombed. Soldiers were going into churches demanding identification and wanting the pastors to give away the names of the people who attended, the members of their church, their congregation, or just going in there, disrupting the services, arresting people, arresting pastors and priests, and people just didn't hear that the news about all that stopped, and people were not hearing about that. Occasionally you'd hear something here and there, but there's so what I'd like, my desire is that we can get the message out that, hey, people are suffering, churches are being bombarded, people are hurting, and bombs are falling on hospitals, on schools, on marketplaces, on infrastructure. This winter, people, I don't know if you are aware of this, you might be, but the there was no heat. The infrastructure was bombed, and it was the coldest winter that Ukraine had experienced in many, many years. So
Right.
that infrastructure was destroyed by Russian bombing, but the churches really rose up and were helping people. People were coming to the churches, charging up their mobile phones so they could communicate with their family. They were getting a hot cup of tea, a bowl of soup, something, and a place to warm up for a little while. All over the streets of Kyiv and different areas, people were having like almost like parties. They had these
Nice.
big, massive cauldrons where they were making borscht, and people were coming and getting soup and they had bands that were playing music, and people were doing things to survive. People were helping each other. There were older people trapped on maybe 12, 13 floors of apartment buildings or whatever, but certainly not street level. And many of them were sick and they had no water, they had nothing. So a lot of volunteers were going up to these apartments to help these elderly people, to bring them food, to bring them water, to bring them some of the things that they might need. So
Right.
that kind of leads into the resilience of the Ukrainian people. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
And if I could
it is.
just mention on February 2nd not February 2nd, June 2nd of this month, my friend's church was bombed.
Mm.
The offices were destroyed. The sanctuary was shaken up, some damage, and almost entirely fine. except, you know, the electricity and different things that were necessary were destroyed. The big screen was destroyed, but they were able to kind of piece it together so they could use it. On Sunday, they still had a Sunday service. All the people from the church, his church, people from
Mhm.
neighboring churches came and they helped clean it up. You wouldn't, I mean, in about 2 or 3 days, that place was pretty clean. It was, you would never, you didn't see the shattered glass and the broken furniture. And I have to show you this picture. I don't know if you can see it. This is the
Yep.
sanctuary. The
Mhm.
only thing left standing was the Ukrainian flag.
Wow, look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. So when you
It's
talk about resilience,
That's exactly what I was going to say. The testament of Ukrainian
that
resilience. That's
picture
brilliant.
spoke to me so much. You know, I
Yes,
thought this is just
absolutely.
amazing. You know, like it
It
was
is.
almost like God saying, I'm with you, I'm standing with you, no matter
I
what.
I
But
agree.
anyway.
Well, I appreciate this incredible revelation of what is happening in the Ukraine, and just closing up with our final couple of questions. Looking ahead, what is your vision for Ukrainians' future and for your continued work with Arise Again too?
Well, we're hoping that the war will end soon. We have a very strong president, and he's very well liked by the Ukrainian people, a majority of the people. Of course, you always have people who don't like someone, but for the most part, people are really standing behind him. They do not want to see Ukrainian territory given up. They don't want that kind of a compromise. They want the integrity of Ukraine to remain and the captured territories to be restored. So I believe that will happen. I really believe God is on our side. And I believe that Ukraine will once again be strong. There will be a lot of rebuilding. Uh, right now, a lot of prisoners of war who have experienced tremendous torture and abuse. That is just incredible when you hear stories. But I believe that they will be restored, and that's very important. So after the war ends, there will be a lot of work that will need to be done. A lot of it will be the healing of hearts and souls of many people who have gone through this. I mean, there are young children who have known nothing but war in the last 4 years. There are young
Mhm.
little children who have lost their fathers, or in some cases, mothers, uh, on
Mhm.
the front lines and in the war, or just walking down the street. How many children have had something terrible happen that they actually saw? So I see a real rebuilding of Ukraine better than ever. And you know, like I told you about the pastor Anatoly's church, everybody got together and everybody worked to be able to have that service on Sunday, church service
Mhm.
on Sunday. So there is a real strong desire for the Ukrainian people to rebuild and to restore
Yes.
their nation, to restore their culture and heritage. Recently, they bombed the Chernobyl. Uh, you remember the Chernobyl power plant incident, nuclear incident? Well, they had a museum and the Russians bombed that so that they would destroy that museum. But so I see a lot of restoration happening, and how Arise Again will help. You know, the war, they need help, but after the war, I think they're going to need more help. Because now, how do
Right.
you rebuild? How do you heal broken hearts? How do you heal those damaged souls? You know, only by the grace of God and by knowing that
Right.
Jesus loves you so much, He will lift you, that He will lift you. And so that's the exciting part to be able to be part of seeing people transformed and healed from all of this last 4.5 years.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. I want to thank you, Nadia, for sharing your remarkable journey and for the work you are doing to bring hope, humanitarian support, and awareness to those affected by the war in Ukraine. And I just want to wish you continued success and blessings in your mission. And for those who are watching who want to support what you do with Arise Again too, how can they do that?
We have a website. It's called ariseagain2.org. So ariseagain2.org. And they can support us through that. We will be going to Ukraine in August. We're planning on that trip to go to Ukraine in August. So you can determine where or what part of what you want to support in Ukraine. There are several different options that you have. But hopefully, you just feel comfortable supporting our mission and allowing us the honor of serving the Lord in Ukraine. And again, ariseagain2.org. I hope I said that clearly enough.
Fantastic. You absolutely did. And Nadia, thank you again. It's been brilliant talking to you, and I hope that we can chat again and get an update as to what's going on in the Ukraine. So God bless you, and thank you for watching the Nikki Clarke Show and finding out more about what is going on in Ukraine through Nadia's incredible missionary work. So I wish you all the best. God bless. Stay informed, stay transformed, and we'll see you next time.